Welcome to another edition of Coast Connections. Today we're going coast to coast to coast with the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. That sounds like another language almost. You'll learn many languages if you travel with the ITAC. And our guest this evening is Teresa Ryder. She's the Director of Partnerships with the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. Teresa, welcome to Coast Connections.
Hello. Hi, it's so nice to see you.
And what territory are you in this evening, Teresa?
Well, today I am joining you from my traditional territory, which is in Vancouver. I am from the Musqueam First Nation, and we share this territory with our relatives from Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh.
Very nice. And I'm coming to you from the Sinemuk First Nation here in Nanaimo. And in Hulkaminam, I think I'm going to say Ichuula. And I think that means, how are you doing? Either that or I've just ordered a big salmon.
Both sound good to me. I'm doing well this evening.
Very good. I try. Now, how long has the Indigenous Tourism Association been in Canada? How long has your organization been here?
Well, we formally incorporated in 2015, but Indigenous tourism, arguably has been with us since time immemorial as we welcomed travelers and traders across our territories, but formally as an association since 2015.
Mm-hmm. And your membership is coast to coast to coast. How many members do you have? How many businesses are represented, Teresa?
We represent about 1,900 businesses from coast to coast to coast, as you said, with a diverse mix of First Nations, Metis and Inuit operators, and really a variety of experiences, wherever it is that you're traveling across Canada.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. And what's the most northern place that you've visited in your role here in Canada?
Well, for me, the most northern is probably Iqaluit. I spent some time up in Nunavut a few years ago, got to meet some throat singers and try some traditional foods and watch some Arctic games, which is a feat unto itself. I've also spent some time in Yukon Territory. Haven't made it to the Northwest Territories yet, but it's on my list of things to do.
Very nice. And Newfoundland and Labrador, there's tourism opportunities there too for cultural experiences?
Absolutely. There's tourism experiences from an Indigenous perspective in every province and territory. In Newfoundland, Labrador, we see the Indigenous base camp at the Torngat Mountains, which provides perspective for visitors, most of them international, as they come into Inuit territory. We also have operators, in city experiences, more urban in southern areas as well. So it really is a diverse mix of tourism businesses and tourism operators that are sharing those Indigenous perspectives.
Mm-hmm. When I hopped on your website, which is a really interesting website to visit, I was really struck by all the different types of lodgings that a person can book, from traditional teepees in Quebec to like a really cool glamping outfit, I think it was in Saskatchewan, and even an ice house or an igloo in northern Canada. What's some of the interesting lodgings that you stayed in?
Yeah, I've had the privilege of staying in a glamping tent before. Haven't tried the teepee or the ice experience yet, but really these are ways that our people are telling stories about our traditional ways of life. And, you see these stories come together under the stars and out in places that are more remote. A lot of our businesses in Canada, more than 60%, are in rural and remote communities. And so it really gives opportunity for those communities and those storytellers to tell us more about their way of life. And I should say, it's not all rustic and remote. There are opportunities. We have a hotel in Vancouver, a beautiful hotel in Port Hardy as well. So for some local experiences, there really is something for everyone if you're looking for an Indigenous place to stay and perhaps learn more about the local people that share that experience with visitors.
Beautiful. And I think this Indigenous tourism is such a nice bridge to reconciliation as well. What are your thoughts on that?
It really is. We often say at ITAC that Indigenous tourism is reconciliation in action. So, as a visitor, maybe that means that you want to learn more about your local place. You're out and experiencing your community, but we're also seeing a mindful shift to visitors and travelers wanting to spend their dollars more meaningfully, and that's through economic reconciliation, perhaps, where we're being more deliberate with the way that we're spending. But Indigenous tourism really does provide that space for visitors to maybe learn songs or language, to interact with Indigenous people in a way that they may not have before, and perhaps ask some questions or learn more about your neighbors. And I think by bridging that gap, Indigenous tourism really is a way for us to enhance our understanding of one another, and through that comes reconciliation, just by finding that place where we can have common ground and learn in common perspective.
That's really, really well stated. Thank you for that. And also being out together in nature, that's also very powerful to be sharing that with Indigenous people, the keepers of Mother Nature for millennium. And also interacting with some of the wildlife out there too. Have you ever seen a spirit bear, for example?
Oh, I wish that was on my list of things. We went to Spirit Bear Lodge a few years ago, and I have the unfortunate non-luck of not seeing spirit bears, but I don't see very many bears in my travels, so that's my jinx. I will say though that it's a very unique thing to go out with our operators, whether you're whale watching, bear watching, horseback riding, and learn the place names, the medicines, the stories of place from a different perspective. Indigenous people are very connected and interconnected with our land, with our language describes the places and the creatures and the beings. And so I highly recommend getting out, getting that fresh air, stretching your legs, off your Zoom meetings, and exploring Canada from that perspective. I mean, there are many places you could take a whale watching tour or a wildlife tour, but doing with an Indigenous operator is something special, and they leave a little bit of themselves with you when you get to have that experience.
Very nice. And are they speaking some of the local languages too when we go out on these tours?
Absolutely. I mean, we have hundreds of Indigenous languages from place, so I am not brave like you to try and explain or say things in the language, but you can expect to learn language and songs and stories of place at many of our experiences. So really is something special.
And on your website too, it looks like there's opportunities for like drum making and carving opportunities with some of the artisans. Have you had a chance to participate in that way, Teresa?
Oh, what a special way. I mean, I've had the great pleasure of doing many workshops, whether it's an arts and craft workshop and you're taking something unique home, or doing an interactive workshop like making a piece of bannock to put over the fire. And I think by learning to do these things on your own, you kind of gain that perspective and the story of how these things are created, and really just adds to the experience when you can make your own souvenir to take home.
And it looks like there's lots of opportunities right across the country to participate in those different types of cultural traditions, and hands-on, and being guided with the local Indigenous people. So
yeah, and with elders and youth, I mean, we're seeing a revitalization of our culture, certainly through Indigenous tourism efforts. And so as a visitor, you're able to kind of learn alongside us, and as I said, take that piece home, that special something that's going to remind you of your travels.
And Teresa, no vacation or trip is complete without some really good food. So what can people expect when they hop on a tour that's from one of these Indigenous groups? What's some of the most unusual food that you've tried?
Oh, goodness. Well, when you're expecting and you want to try Indigenous food, there's lots of great places you can do that. On Vancouver Island at the Qualilas Hotel, there's an excellent restaurant right in the hotel that you can experience. In Vancouver, Salmon and Bannock, many places, Feast Bistro in Winnipeg. And Indigenous culinary is something that we're starting to hear a little bit more about, I think. You know, if you travel to Italy, you want to try pasta. If you go to Japan, you want to try the sushi. And so the Indigenous chefs that we work with are starting to tell that food story and really bring those local flavors. For me, I mean, working along our Indigenous culinary network, I've had some very interesting food experiences. Probably the most unique for me, I had an Indigenous chef from Nunavut that prepared seal for us. It's not something, of course, that you would find on a menu very often in the South, but as a staple of Inuit diet, and it was not what I was expecting. I was pleasantly surprised, but there's many experiences like that where you can really try food of place that you wouldn't get at a local fast food restaurant. That's for sure.
I had the opportunity also of trying seal when I was in Newfoundland once, and I have to say that every Canadian should have a sample at least once. Like nothing else you've ever eaten, you won't forget it. And it's so nutrient dense as well. Like for people who live in the northern part of Canada, that's a staple because it's such rich food. But good to sample, but I've got to say I don't think I've got the stomach for it. But I was glad I tried.
It's different than my West Coast belly, I tell you that. I'm with you. I'm happy I tried it. It was a unique experience and something we can talk about at the very least.
Are there actually like foodie tours that a person can do with the Indigenous Tourism Association? Just if you're looking.
I mean, certainly there are places where you could try food and beverages. I would say the Okanagan is probably where I would start. We have 2 Indigenous wineries, an Indigenous spirit producer, and several Indigenous restaurants, Kukuli Cafe, the Bear, the Fish, the Root, the Berry, which is in Osoyoos. So you could kind of make a day of it and sample some of the local foods and wine as well from the area. So definitely where I would start if I was looking for that foodie experience. Yeah, definitely.
And would you also have an opportunity to put on an apron and do some hands-on cooking with an Indigenous chef?
There is that opportunity. We have a provider in Winnipeg that does that experience. You can make bannock and she tells you the story about kind of the tradition of bannock while you're doing that. The Winnipeg Jets went and did that tour. It was on their social channels if you wanted to check it out. But she really tells you, and you get to get your hands dirty and kind of feel what it means to produce Indigenous foods. So those tours definitely exist, and you can learn more on the Destination Indigenous website about what kind of opportunities kind of tailored to your needs and to your desires when you're traveling.
Teresa, what about traditional Indigenous medicine and plants and herbs and that type of thing? Is that also available as part of the cultural tourism?
It is. And the one that comes to mind right off the bat is Mohican Trails. She operates in the Banff area. Brenda is a medicine woman and does a lot of traditional harvesting. And she welcomed visitors on that tour to describe what the medicines are and how they're used, whether that's in, physical well-being or to make teas. And she's one of many providers across the country where you can really have that land-based experience that's also, something that you might be able to bring home with you as well, that knowledge of how to use plants. So those are definitely experiences that are available to visitors and that could be purchased in many parts of the country.
That would be very interesting, wouldn't it, to learn about some of these ancient methods of healing.
It's pretty amazing when you think about what the ancestors were able to figure out long before, a scientific explanation for how to use a plant or a root, that these are things that our people have known and that they carry on that tradition of knowing how to use those medicines. And so it really is something special that knowledge and that wisdom continues, and that we're continuing to pass on those traditions to our younger people, and that we're able to create an economy or create an opportunity for others to share in that experience.
Mm-hmm. There's some great photos too of these beautiful Haida canoes going out on the water with tourists, enjoying the canoe trip in these beautiful crafted boats. Tell us a little bit more about some of the canoeing opportunities.
Well, bring your muscles, I'll tell you that. It isn't for the faint of heart. But we do have several canoe experiences, Vancouver, Okanagan, where you can go out and experience this traditional way of moving around our territories, often including in that experience are songs and stories of the place, and just a good way to get out and get fresh air and really learn that connection to an appreciation for how we used to move around our territories. So, as I said, it's hard work. It's impressive what these operators do, but really a lot of fun. And I've had the pleasure of doing a couple of those experiences as well. So great opportunity.
Nice. And I imagine there's also an opportunity to carve your own paddle.
I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to do some look. I wouldn't say no, because there has to be someone out there that's providing that opportunity. And if not, that's a good business idea.
There you go. Now, Teresa, are you attracting tourists from all over the world? What's your demographic like? Who's coming out?
Well, prior to COVID, it was mostly international visitors that were looking to better understand Indigenous people. We saw a lot of interest from the US, from the UK, Germany, China, Japan. I think we can appreciate that over the last few years, that opportunity came to a very abrupt stop. And during the same time period, we also had the discoveries at the Kamloops Residential School, which created an opportunity for Canadians to learn more, and the interest certainly increased from Canadians to understand better and gain that perspective for who Indigenous people are in this country. So we have seen a bit of a shift. We have seen that more Canadians are participating in Indigenous experiences, but certainly, we're looking forward to those international visitors coming back. They're slowly coming. But we're really looking forward to the international visitors returning to continue to support and sustain our businesses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm wearing some Indigenous jewelry this evening from local creators. Are there opportunities for people to actually make jewelry on some of these Indigenous tours, or sit with the artisans and see how these things are produced and created?
There are. I mean, I've had some really great experiences hands-on. I was up in Haida Gwaii and had the pleasure of being in a master carver's workshop. I know similarly on Vancouver Island, in the Tofino area, you can go and learn from the producers. But I've also had some fun. I wouldn't say that they're expert level by any means, but sat with an elder at Metis Crossing in Alberta, where she taught us how to make porcupine quill earrings. And you just really come to appreciate the skill that it takes to build just a simple earring piece, or to watch what it takes to carve a pole. So these are opportunities that are most definitely available. And for those that are not looking to make their own, we do also have many Indigenous galleries and gift shops. And we just encourage visitors and people looking for these gifts to really ask the questions about how those galleries are supported, and if they're making good decisions in terms of their relationships with their artists, so that the most benefit is going back to the artists, and that the goods that they're purchasing are authentic.
Right, because we don't want to appropriate artists' creations and use them in ways that they weren't meant to, sell them in ways that they weren't meant to be sold. So that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's a big challenge. It's something that we continue to talk about at ITAC, about how we support visitors and travelers when they're wanting to take home some of our beautiful art with them. Yeah. And so we do definitely have ethically sourced, goods and artwork that can be brought home by travelers. You just need to ask the questions and make sure that you know that the artist is named in the work that you're buying.
Mm-hmm. Cultural appropriation, that's what I was thinking of. That's the term. That's English too, and I have trouble with it.
It's a big challenge.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah. Some of the opportunities on the prairies, are there any links with like the grasslands or buffalo, that type of experience that people might be
There
exposed to?
are. I mean, Saskatoon is one of my favorite cities in this country for its diversity of Indigenous experiences. And, I think of Wanuskewin Heritage Park, where they've just reintroduced buffalo to their lands. They've had new baby buffalo born on their lands as well. And they have a cultural center. So you can learn about the Plains people and then really look at their way of life and see it firsthand from how they used to follow the bison across their territory. They also have a beautiful hotel in the area at Dakota Dunes. It's just built in 2020. It opened its doors with a fantastic Indigenous restaurant. And nearby, they have land-based tours at Beardy's Okamesis First Nation, where you can get out and live maybe perhaps or stay more traditionally on the land, but connect with elders and youth and have a more land-based experience. So, there's really a diversity of experiences across the prairies. Saskatoon is just one example of many. And of course, I don't want to leave any of our other favorite experiences out, but just one that comes to mind of where you could go to a destination and have multiple experiences over your stay.
Hmm. Now, earlier when we were chatting before the show, you mentioned the Arctic Games that you were attended in Northern Canada. What time of year does that take place?
I was there in February,
Oh,
so it was
wow,
happening for
February.
that time, and we had some of the athletes that joined us in some of the games that they play. And my understanding is that these types of games were played during times when they couldn't go out and hunt, so it's ways of entertaining themselves. Just one example of many, though, in the north where you can have experience. I mean, certainly being from Vancouver Island, I know that we don't have the opportunities in the snow. So, the games are one, but you can go out and learn how to herd caribou or take a dog sledding excursion. So there really are many, many examples of ways that you can experience kind of the northern way of life that we don't always have the privilege of being on the West Coast. So I really would just encourage anyone looking for that kind of winter excursion or a northern experience to look on our website, destinationindigenous.ca. And as I said before, you can really find that experience that is tailored to your travel needs.
I had no idea that the people herded caribou. I thought caribou ran wild, but it looked like in
It's
that
pretty
photo,
amazing.
like he's actually herding caribou. Would he be
It's
using a
pretty
dog sled
amazing.
or a
We've
skidoo?
we've modernized.
Okay,
He's on an ATV.
okay, yeah.
That's Kylek. He's at Tundra North Adventures in the Tuktoyaktuk area, I believe.
That's. How cold was it when you were there, Teresa?
Cold enough that I didn't have a jacket warm enough to go outside.
There you go. But I bet the igloo was pretty warm, right? That if you were
It
able to
does.
stay
It's
in one.
surprisingly, it breaks the wind for you.
Wow, wow.
Mhm.
Did you sleep overnight in an igloo or
I
no?
can't say I did.
Yeah.
It's on the list of things that I'll do, I'm
Hmm.
sure, over time.
Yeah. What's one of the most unusual wildlife sightings that you've had?
Just recently, I saw a blonde grizzly bear on my way to Banff. And I told you at the outset, not much of a bear seer. But this bear popped up and it was like light. And I thought at first it was a spirit bear. But apparently there are blonde grizzly bears that live in the area.
I had no idea we had blonde grizzlies.
I didn't know either.
No. Wow. There's going to be a
Yeah.
tour about that, I'm sure. The blonde
Yeah, it was
grizzly
pretty
tour.
remote in the mountains, but I mean, there's lots of grizzly bear tours on the coast, Homolko wildlife viewing, and Seawolf Adventures perhaps are places where you might want to go and see some of those operators that really know how to find those bears.
And Teresa, your programs and tours are geared to a wide price range, aren't they? Like it's very affordable, or you can go for a little more elite experience.
There really is. I mean, many of our cultural centers are geared towards families or students, so you'll see a lower price point perhaps. And then, of course, you can add on these extra workshops or food experiences like we talked about. We also have fully immersive experiences. I mean, you could do a multi-day package to Haida Gwaii. You could do a multi-day package to Gross Moor National Park or to the Torngat's Mountains, where it really is fully immersive. So really, there is something for everyone where everything from that probably $20 family comfortable point to where you could have a day excursion and learn about your local neighbors or have that kind of cultural or museum experience. But then there is everything from, you stay for 5, 6, 7 nights and have a multi-tour itinerary.
Mm-hmm. All inclusive.
All inclusive.
Yeah, yeah. And what age range are you seeing?
It's been a shift. We have seen, traditionally we see kind of the retiree crowd that's looking for those bucket list experiences, but it has shifted to, something where we're seeing that 30, 40-year-old crowd where they're wanting to learn more and having that reconciliation journey of their own or just wanting to experience Canada. I think we have a tendency to travel to other places and learn about Indigenous or local people. And we have such a diverse offering here in Canada that I think people are starting to understand and better understand and want to learn about that diversity here in our own country.
Very nice. We've got about 2 minutes left, Teresa. Give us your best pitch for why we should book an Indigenous tour this summer.
Oh, you have to go. Indigenous tourism will open your eyes to the diversity of Indigenous people here in the country, change perspectives perhaps about what our country looked like before and what our country looks like now. So I really encourage you to go to destinationindigenous.ca. Trust me, there's something for any traveler type and in almost every community across the country with 1,900 businesses, First Nations, Metis and Inuit. I'm sure that you'll find something that enhances your travel plans for the summer.
Beautiful. And what's at the top of your list this summer? Where's Teresa heading to?
Oh, where's Teresa heading? I feel like all I've done is sit in front of my office. I'm a West Coast girl, so I'll probably head out to Sasquatch country, to the Harrison area, and do some camping over the summer.
And I hope you actually meet Sasquatch. I think that would be quite an experience. You haven't seen a spirit bear, but maybe you'll see.
Stories for you about the Sasquatch. That's for another day.
That's another episode.
Yeah.
We'll have you back for your Sasquatch stories.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for sharing all this beautiful knowledge with us and informing us about all the opportunities that we have here, right in our backyard here in Canada, to learn more about Indigenous culture and arts. We really appreciate you enlightening us on this topic.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me, and I hope everybody enjoys their Indigenous tourism travels over the summer.
Thank you. Stay safe, stay well, and in Hulkaminam, I want to say Haichka. Thank you.
Haichka, Namakwa. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa. And thank you for joining us, and I hope that you get to hop on the ITAC website and select a tour that you'd like to see, whether it be a couple of hours or several days or a week here in Canada. All kinds of opportunities to learn about the Indigenous peoples here. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Coast Connections.